Kevin, thank you so much for coming on the Light Up Your Metabolism podcast. I'm so excited to chat with you today about a very special topic and something I have not covered on the podcast, which is bone health. So welcome to the show.
Danielle, thank you so much for having me. It's such an important topic, so I'm glad we get to discuss it today.
Yeah, I am too. I'm glad my friend Molly Eastman connected us, because when she said she was chatting with you, I immediately thought about my grandma who passed away. She had osteoporosis, and I believe she died of a complication of it, actually. And then my mom and my aunt, I did get permission to tell tell everyone that they have osteoporosis as well. And so this is something that is, quote, in my family, but because our genes do not provide our destiny, our genes just sort of load the gun, and our environment and our lifestyle, our diet would pull the trigger. So I need to just be cognizant to work on these factors and be mindful of them so those genes for osteoporosis do not turn on or express in me. So I'd love to hear from you, just to start with your story of how you started on this journey of helping women with osteopenia and osteoporosis.
Yeah, because it's not typically the younger male.
Yeah.
Health and osteoporosis. Yeah. So for me, it started with my own health journey. And I would take it back to before I was even born. When my mother was 5 months pregnant with me, my father was told he had cancer. And 2 months after I was born, he passed away. And he was 35 years old at that time. So my entire life, I had this fear that I was going to follow in his footsteps to an early grave, that 35 was my finish line, and that all time could do was slow up or, the descent into the hourglass. And I really just wanted to figure out what I needed to do to live a healthy life. But he was also a Marine, and I knew I wanted to go be in the Marines and follow in his footsteps. So I went in the Marines. When I came out of the Marines, I had a variety of different health issues. I had high stress, poor sleep, chronic digestive issues. I was diagnosed with celiac disease. For those who are not familiar, celiac disease is an autoimmune condition where when you ingest gluten, it damages the villi, these tiny little nutrient absorption centers in your small intestine. And I like to call them roots in your soil. And my roots became blunted and damaged. They couldn't absorb the nutrients. They couldn't do their job. And your body still needs these nutrients to execute its daily functions, specifically calcium. Calcium is the primary mineral constituent of your bones. And if you're not able to absorb it, your body still needs it for muscle contractions and nerve impulses. So it's going to go find that calcium. So it was going to my bones, the largest reserve of minerals we have, and it was pulling from there. And that was leading to bone loss and a subsequent diagnosis of osteoporosis right around 30 years old. And I was shocked. I really didn't know what I needed to do. And I didn't want to leave my kids in a position where they didn't have a father. And so I had a pretty strong impetus to do the reading and the research and make improvements. And not only did I do that for me, I became a health coach. I built out a team. We grew we built out a program together for Stronger Bones. And we've got about 250,000 people in that community today. So it's been quite the journey, but I love serving and helping people.
That's amazing. I cannot believe that as a young male, you got diagnosed with osteoporosis at 30, because we traditionally think about this for maybe postmenopausal, perimenopausal women. So let's start by defining, in case someone doesn't know, what is osteopenia and osteoporosis, and then how common are these things?
Yeah, osteoporosis literally means porous bone. And it's a condition that's characterized by either not enough bone formation, excessive bone loss, or it's a combination of the two of those things. And in osteoporosis, both your bone density and your bone quality are reduced, and that's going to increase your risk of fracture. Now, the way you find out you even have osteoporosis is you go get something called a bone density scan, DEXA scan. So dual energy X-ray absorptiometry, painless test, kind of like an X-ray, very low levels of radiation though. You lay down on the machine, it does a scan, it tells you your bone mineral density, the actual mineral content of your bone. It actually generates a score. And if that score is +1 or -1, that's considered normal and healthy. If it's -1 to -2.5, that's considered osteopenia. We would call it low bone mass. That's like a precursor to osteoporosis. And if it's -2.5 or lower, so minus 2.6, minus 2.7, so on and so forth, that's considered osteoporosis. And the greater the negative number becomes, the more severe the osteoporosis. And most people aren't getting these bone density scans until they're later in life, right? Until
Yeah.
they're 65 years old, insurance finally covers it. Their doctors probably could have done something, ran the scan earlier, found out something that they could have prevented possibly. And they're getting these scans and they get this diagnosis and they're like, oh my gosh, what do I even do at this point?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where they're at when they get this diagnosis. But I will say a note about bone density scans.
Okay.
A lot of times they only tell part of the picture.
Mm.
They tell the density part, the mineral content of the bone part of the picture. What they don't often tell is the quality part of the picture. So bone density and bone quality combine to create bone strength. So bone quality is the structural integrity of the bone, the microarchitecture, how the bone is organized. Those two things combine to create bone strength. So oftentimes people only have part of the picture if they just get the bone density by itself. You can ask the facility that you're going to get something called TBS technology. You can ask them if they have this capability, and that's called trabecular bone score capability. It's like an add-on software to the DEXA. Some facilities have it, some don't. You call ahead, you ask them if they have it. If they do, you can get your bone density, bone quality part of the picture together in the same visit. So now we've got a little bit better picture of the state of our bones. And the last part we want to tie in to really understand where our bones are at today is you have to understand that when you get one of these scans, especially if you only have one, you only have a snapshot in time.
Mm.
You don't know if you're still actively losing bone right now, present day, right? So we can look at markers in the blood and the urine that help you understand if you're actively losing bone right now, present day. So those markers would be called bone turnover markers. And the most sensitive marker for bone formation or bone resorption or breakdown is called serum CTX. And this test looks at the activity level of cells that are breaking down your bone. And if that activity level is elevated or even really high, that can be an indicator of active bone loss and a root cause issue that needs to be addressed. So bone densities don't always tell that full part of the picture. You got other tests that I gave you there that can really help you understand the full picture.
Yeah, that is really helpful. I've never heard anything like that. And it sort of reminded me of how osteopenia feels like the pre-diabetes, osteoporosis is like the diabetes, and then it can just kind of keep getting worse. And so in my world, it's sort of that comparison there. And also how people would look at a fasting glucose. That's a snapshot in time. It's not telling us the whole picture. Instead we can put on a continuous glucose monitor, also get an A1C. So you're giving us all these really great tools of extra things we can be asking for and reminders that we don't have to wait until things get bad to test for these things. So when would you recommend maybe starting to test for this for the average person?
Well, let's think about when someone is reaching peak bone mass, which
Okay.
is right around 30 years of age. So even as we're leading up to that, and this is important. So listen up. If you've got kids or you've got grandkids, pay attention to this because this is really important. As you're leading up to about 18 years old, 0 to 18, you're putting on 90% of your bone mass in that time.
Wow.
So really, really important to help people from a young age build that strong, healthy foundation because it could add 10, 20, 30 years to the end of their life where they're more active, more healthy, vibrant, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So if you do that from a young age, that can be really, really helpful. So, and if you are already beyond that age, just know that things that took place between 0 to 18 could have affected the current state of your bone health today. What could those be? Well, if you had poor diet nutrition, if you were eating
Cereal.
lots of sugary candy and
Yeah.
drinking soda and pop and not getting enough important vitamins, minerals, nutrients, vitamin D, vitamin K2, magnesium, calcium, all those are really important from a young age, vitamin C. If you led a sedentary lifestyle, if you weren't outside playing around, if you weren't playing sports like soccer where you're moving in short, sharp, dynamic movements, stimulating new bone growth, if you weren't doing gymnastics, those kinds of things,
Mm-hmm.
That can be a contributing factor. If you smoked or drank excessively, if you took certain medications like glucocorticoids, if you had an eating disorder, all of those things could play into your current state of your bone health. So in between 0 to 18, 90% of that bone mass is put on.
Mm.
And then, but between 18 to 30, you put on the remaining about 10%. So right at about 30, your bucket, your bone health bucket is about full. So that's where your peak bone mass is. That's where I like people to get these scans if you can get them, or if, you got to go ask or go to a facility outside of your doctor if you need to. But that can help you get an objective measure from which to monitor future changes. And
Yeah.
that is great to have later on down the road. So if you're listening to this and you haven't had a bone density yet, go get one, get your baseline. And the last note I would make on that is, if you're somebody who's like, well, I don't want to know because I don't want to address something. If there is something there, I would encourage you, go get it anyway, because time is in your favor. The younger you are, as you get older, you can still build bone strength. It just becomes harder.
Mm-hmm.
There are fewer cells involved in the process. The process is less efficient. So the sooner you can do these things, be aware of them, start the prevention, you're going to set yourself up for an active future.
Yeah, so helpful. And I'm just thinking about my childhood in the 80s and 90s eating Trix cereal. And I mean, I guess I did have a little low fat dairy in there, but, hardly any fat. God forbid we had a drop of fat in the 90s, spraying the pan with Pam and cutting off the fat off the chicken cutlets. And I'm just going back and thinking,
all these things are just check.
I know. I'm like, oh, geez. I'm like, I have gotten a bone scan and I believe it was above average for my age. I don't really remember what else. I could probably maybe look at my DEXA while I'm sitting here, but I I was happy to get even a baseline when I did. Let's say I was around 36 when I got it, and because of that in my history. So good to know. I'm going to keep diving in, and then next time I go get it, I'm going to do these add-ons. Do you have some sort of free resource on your website maybe that I can link, where people would basically the summary of what you said about what to test for, these blood markers and urine markers and things?
We have a variety of different guides. Some are free guides, some are paid guides.
Okay.
Not sure exactly if the lab tests are in the free ones or not, but we have lots of free resources for this. But what I will do is, maybe we can link to, at the end of all this free Stronger Bones masterclass that I have.
Yeah, perfect.
That would be a great starting point for people, and we can link to that in the show notes if you're okay with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. We will put that in the show notes for everybody, because, the first time you're hearing these things, the numbers, the letters, the acronyms, they go in and out for me anyway. So, you don't need to be, a lot of people listen as they're driving, don't take notes on your phone. We'll get you an easy link for it. So let's talk about what is causing us to be losing our bones, having porous bones. You mentioned already about the fact that if our gut health is not good, we're sort of shaving down those cilia in the small intestine. We're blocking those roots from absorbing. That would be one of the potential contributors. But what else causes it?
Yeah, there are a variety of different things that can cause bone loss and osteoporosis. There are actually different types of osteoporosis. So there's primary osteoporosis. That is typically related to a decrease in estrogen in postmenopausal women. Estrogen has a protective effect on bone. When estrogen levels decrease, as they do during menopause, that causes an increase in the activity level of cells that break down bone. But then there's a whole nother cause of osteoporosis, and that's called secondary osteoporosis. And that's where it occurs as a result of behaviors, disorders, diseases, conditions, medications. Now, one thing I will point out is, just because you're a postmenopausal woman does not mean that the loss of estrogen is the sole cause of your bone loss. There could be a secondary cause also. So you don't want to make assumptions. A lot of times I hear, I've seen thousands and thousands of people, and a lot of times their doctors would brush them off and say, oh, it's just hormones. Oh, it's a natural part of the aging process. That's going to happen. Here's your calcium, vitamin D, go for a walk, take your bone drug, and we'll see you in a couple of years for your next bone density scan. That's not enough.
Yeah.
right? We have to rule out any of these other potential contributors, make the objective decisions, and then start focusing on getting the diet, the absorption, all the other things we could talk about in just a minute, the exercise, all the other important pieces. But we got to rule out these causes. So let's talk about a couple of the bigger causes or more important causes. And one that we can tie in that I think is important would be metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, blood sugar levels. Let's talk about those and their connection to bone health too. So if we've got obesity, high blood sugar, high blood pressure, abnormal cholesterol levels, those are all making up that metabolic syndrome, right? And they can have a negative impact on your bone health and contribute to bone loss. One of the reasons for that is abdominal fat can help produce some of these different inflammatory messengers, interleukin 1, interleukin 6, tumor necrosis factor alpha, C-reactive protein. Those can contribute to low-grade inflammation and increase the production and activity level of these cells called osteoclasts that are breaking down that bone. So that's not a good thing, of course. Mm-hmm. The other thing is if we have lots of salt and lots of sugar from packaged processed foods in our diet, we can see a rise in cortisol levels. That's going to help contribute to obesity, but also contribute to more bone loss. Another one would be for high blood sugar. When a person has elevated levels of blood glucose on an ongoing basis, it can cause obviously health complications with their eyes, the cardiovascular system. It can cause nerve damage, but the kidneys can also be affected. And especially with kidneys, high blood sugar can damage the kidneys, and damaged kidneys have a much harder time reabsorbing calcium, right? So high blood sugar is going to increase inflammation. That's not going to be good for our bones either. So you just have to be aware of some of these things. And I know this is a big focus of your work, which is great. And you want to address at least that as some of the underlying issues. Now, some of the other bigger underlying issues we can talk about would be medications that people might be taking. One of which would be glucocorticoids. So prednisone. So if you took prednisone, you're on it right now, just know that will contribute to bone loss. The most precipitous bone loss is going to take place once you first start that in the first couple months. But if you continue to take it, you will have more bone loss. So be aware of that. Mm-hmm. Another one would be PPIs, proton pump inhibitors, or H2 receptor antagonist drugs. And these are drugs that either reduce the production of or increase the suppression of your stomach acid. Now, stomach acid is really, really important. And a lot of times people take these PPIs because they think they have too much stomach acid, when in reality, they actually have too little. Yep. Counterintuitive, but I know that's what a lot of people do. You need good stomach acid levels to properly break down and extract nutrients from your food.
Especially minerals.
Yes, yep. Minerals, amino acids, the building blocks of protein are amino acids. So your bones are 50% protein by volume, and they're also made up of minerals. So if you're not getting enough amino acids, you can't even build that structure to help support the minerals that are going to be part of your bones. So you got to have good, healthy stomach acid levels for that. Calcium, magnesium, iron, B12. You want to make sure you have good, healthy stomach acid for that. So that's another contributing factor. And sometimes I'll see people that have been on PPIs for 30 years, which is pretty crazy, long periods of time.
Yeah. We learned in nutritional therapy school that PPIs, these stomach acid suppressing drugs, they drive slow starvation. And it's a sort of harsh way of putting it, but it's actually accurate. And it is a scary thing, because if we are blocking stomach acid, I call it the linchpin of the digestive tract. If that's not working right, the stomach acid is what triggers pepsin to turn on. Pepsin is an enzyme that digests protein, so breaks down the proteins into those amino acids so that they can be used to build strong bones. And then sort of relating this to what you said earlier about that gut inflammation, how we're sort of shaving down those little hairs in there because we're having for you, gluten is an inflammatory food actually for all human beings, especially the way that the wheat is produced in the United States. It's an inflammatory food. But when we don't have proper stomach acid, we don't break down the food properly. And then a healthy food can become an inflammatory food in the gut because our body doesn't know what to do with a hunk of steak. It knows what to do with a zinc, an amino acid, a B vitamin. But if we're having these big chunks of food, it can be a big issue and also contribute to reduced nutrient absorption. So it's, connecting everything you said. And that's one of the things, like, we tend to silo in the West. They silo all these different body parts, and it's like, it's all connected. It's all connected. So I love what you're saying. The idea of the glucocorticoids, if you think about that word, that compound word, glucose and corticoids. So it's a stress hormone that increases our cortisol. And what does increased cortisol do? Increase our glucose. And like you said, the very first thing is that if we have chronically high glucose levels, we're going to have these issues. And then I also have a feeling that you're going to say, that stress is probably going to be a factor that also degrades our bones, because that high cortisol, if we're getting that artificially from these steroid hormones, and that's an issue. I have a feeling that just having high stress levels in our daily life burn through minerals, drive leaky gut. So again, just connecting all these factors. And for me, I don't often think of this. I don't often think of the bones. I'm going to be honest. Like, I don't often think of bones. And so it's just not surprising that, let's say if someone's like, wow, I never thought of a bone. I never thought of it being something that is changing. It feels like a fixed structure because it feels so hard. But what you're sharing here is that bones are very dynamic. They're building, they're growing, they're breaking down, they're building up all the time. So they're just as dynamic as anything else in our body that's always changing, even though they're hard. So this idea, can you talk to us more about stress and how it impacts our bones?
Yeah, for sure. You nailed it, though, too, is a lot of people think our bones are just these static structures that carry us through life. They do that. They do a good job of it, but they also serve other roles. They protect your important organs. They are a nutrient storage center.
Yeah.
They help give you life. So think about bone marrow, stem cells, blood cells, all of those things. They are an endocrine organ. They are living tissue. They are dynamic. They are changing. They are so, so important. You have to preserve and strengthen your bone structure. And now let's talk about stress, because there is a connection between stress and our bones. There is good stress that you can apply to your bones. We'll talk about that in a second. And that would be when you're incorporating physical exercise and activity and resistance training and muscle strengthening exercise. We'll talk about all that in just a second. I'll give you very specific instructions on that. But in terms of cortisol and stress, and we're talking about mental and psychological stress too. I'm talking about, I know we always reference the lion, but it's scrolling through Instagram, right? And not keeping up with the lives of the Joneses, or family conflict, or financial challenges, or kids aren't getting along, or something like that, something at work, right? All of those things can contribute to and drive that stress response. You hit on a couple of the big ones. When you have cortisol, chronic stress, blood sugar can be affected. It's going to increase your blood sugar levels, can affect weight gain and obesity, can increase leaky gut, intestinal permeability, can increase cardiovascular disease risk, and set you up for hormonal imbalances too. It can also decrease your immune system function. It can impact other hormone levels like thyroid function, your mood, your brain health, sleep quality, all of those things. But when it comes to the bones specifically, chronic stress and high cortisol are going to reduce progesterone production. Now, progesterone is really important because it has a role in stimulating bone collagen formation and in bone preservation. So if you're reducing the production of this, that's not going to be a good thing for supporting your bones. Yeah. It also reduces the ability of the cells that build bone to form that new bone. So now we've got a situation where we've got more bone loss. We also can't build that bone back up. Okay. And then we talked about glucocorticoids a minute ago. When we have these high glucocorticoids, they actually kill osteocytes. Osteocytes are an important bone cell because they are orchestrators of the bone remodeling process.
Oh.
So bone being broken down and bone being formed. And
So kind of
osteocytes,
like the foreman at like a construction site type of a thing,
yeah.
like
So
kind of directing that.
they're like orchestrators of this bone remodeling process, right? So
Okay.
they sense mechanical loading and stress and things like that. And what they do is they send out a signal that tell the bones, hey, we need to become stronger. So then what happens is the osteoclasts receive that signal. They come in, they scoop out the damaged bone, and then right behind it, it's a coupled process. The osteoblasts build, they come in and build stronger, healthier new bone. The osteocytes are orchestrators of that process. So if we're killing them off, we're killing off the cells that are orchestrating that process, right?
Oh, like the intelligence of the
So,
bone. Yeah.
so now we
Yeah.
see why it's so important to keep those stress levels in check.
Hmm.
And I'm not talking about just a long, slow exhale while you're sitting at a stoplight. That can help. You
Yeah.
need to cultivate a healthy practice, incorporating meditation or something like that into your daily life. That's something I used to laugh at. 15 years ago, I used to laugh at doing meditation. My background being a Marine, I'm tough. I don't need this.
Yeah.
And it is, I couldn't live without it. Now, it's such an important practice for me. So that would be an important tip to incorporate.
Yeah. So helpful. So let's talk about, you mentioned, I'm not sure where you think we should go next. So either I wanted to talk about how they typically treat osteoporosis, but then maybe after that we can go into those strategies that you mentioned about movement and things like that. So let's maybe talk about how the standard treatment, you mentioned something like a calcium and a vitamin D pill, and it's like I think the body's a little bit more complex than that. Like based on what we were talking about, what we have been saying, it feels like all of this is very, it's not just like, oh, there's calcium, let's put it in the bones, right? Like, so what's the standard treatment, and maybe why do they often fail?
Yeah. So let's even start with when you get that diagnosis, right? You
Hmm.
go get your bone density scan, and let's say it does come back, and they say you've got osteopenia. I call it low bone mass, but you're going to be told this is osteopenia, or you get told you have osteoporosis. The doctor that you go see, even if they're really well intentioned and they want to help you, the tool they have to help you is a pharmaceutical. So they're going to recommend take some calcium, take some vitamin D, go for a walk. Here's your bone drug. We'll see you in a couple years for your next bone density scan. And this happens in like a 15-minute, 20-minute period. You, as the patient, as your own best advocate, you have the right to say, hey, I need a little more information,
Mm.
right? I need to get a little more data. Am I still losing bone? What's causing that loss? Are there other pieces at play here before you just jump right into something like that? Because the drugs that are recommended, they're not like taking an aspirin. They have a dramatic effect on bone physiology. And I would liken their use to that old economic adage there's no such thing as a free lunch. There
Mm.
are risks and side effects and short and long term implications of using these medications, and you just have to be aware of them. And normally, you're not educated about that in a 15-minute conversation. So I'll educate you about them right now. So there are two categories of drugs that are pretty much going to be recommended: anti-resorptives and anabolics.
Hmm.
Anti-resorptives are drugs that designed to slow down the activity level of cells that break down bone, and they do that. But they also come with risks and side effects and short and long-term implications of use.
Mm.
One of the types of drugs underneath anti-resorptives are called bisphosphonates. So Fosamax, Reclast, Actonel, Boniva. You probably heard of these names,
Yeah, my grandma was on Boniva. I would
right?
love to hear the side effects of these.
So first, we'll say that the safety and efficacy of these drugs is not really well known beyond 5 years. And as you and I and everyone are going about their daily lives, doing their daily activities, doing chores around the house, working out, exercising, you're starting to get these tiny little micro cracks and micro fractures in your bones. That's normal for everybody. Okay. And then what happens is you have those cells within the bone, the osteocytes, that sense that damage and they send out the signal. They
Right.
say, hey, we need to become stronger. So we have the osteoclasts that come in right after
Hmm.
and they scoop out that damaged bone. And then we have the osteoblasts that come in right behind that, fill in that stronger, healthier new bone.
Yeah.
You can actually, if you're on these medications for longer periods of time, especially a couple of years, you can slow down that process too much to where you start to accumulate that old, worn, damaged, weakened bone over time. So even if you're going to get another bone density scan in the future, and it shows that your density is stable, or it's maybe even improving a little bit, the quality, the structural integrity, the microarchitecture may not be. So it may look like you have bone that's just as strong or maybe a little bit stronger, but it might not actually be. Okay, so you just have to be aware of that.
Yeah.
There's another drug or category type of drug called rank ligand inhibitor. That would be Prolia. And this drug is not a drug that you can just get on and get off of. You can't quit it cold turkey. If you start it, if you try to stop, it can actually increase your risk of vertebral fractures if you don't follow it up with something else. So that's an important one. And then I'll just close out before we talk about the proactive things that you can do, the positive things you can do. I do want to touch on the other category of bone medications, which are anabolics. Now, these drugs are designed to build bone, build better quality bone, and build it faster. Can they do it? Of course they can, but not without risks and side effects and long-term implications of use. So for these drugs, they're typically going to be recommended to someone who has had low trauma or no trauma fractures. Maybe they have really poor bone quality. Maybe their use is appropriate. Okay, I'm not anti-medication, but I'm pro do everything you possibly can before you get to that point.
Yeah.
So you just have to be aware that if you start one of these medications, you have to follow it with one of the anti-resorptives just to not lose the bone you just gained. I see people just stop it cold turkey and they lose all that bone that they just gained. So again, you got to be aware of these things. There's more to it that we can educate on another point, but those are some of the really, really important pieces with the medication.
So with the medications that are building up the bone, is it possible that they could maybe deposit things inappropriately in the body, maybe in a different area? Like how we think about potentially if you take calcium, the calcium may not go to the bone. It may sort of build up in the walls of your arteries or something like that. Is that fair to say? Or
well, this brings in kind of the nutrient part of the picture now too.
Okay.
So the anabolics that we were talking about, they will and can, as long as you don't have some underlying cause or issue still contributing to bone loss, they will and can build better quality bone and build it faster. But there are some nuances with the use of it. I'm not always pro, for those. Again, I'm pro do everything naturally first before you go to that if it's possible. So, but the nutrients play into that. Absolutely. Where calcium, we don't want calcium going to the soft tissues like the kidneys and the arteries. We don't want that. But oftentimes your doctor is not going to tell you that K2 is a really important vitamin to help with that. So vitamin K2 is really important because it activates osteocalcin and matrix GLA protein. And that helps make sure that the calcium that you're taking is going to the bones and not the soft tissues and the arteries. So very important nutrient you want to be incorporating. Now you can get that from different foods. You can get it from natto is one source of it. Bacterial fermentation in our guts. You can get it from eggs, different fermented foods. Emu oil is a rich source of vitamin K2. Most of the time, it's easy. It can be easier to supplement K2 also.
Yeah. A lot of people are supplementing with vitamin D, and I'm learning some things that are making me sort of not want to recommend that to a lot of people, but many people just take it by itself. And I've heard that that can decrease the amount of K2 because it brings us an imbalance. So can you maybe speak to that a little?
Well, I'll even touch on, in terms of vitamin D supplementation,
Yeah.
it acts as a hormone too. It's not just a vitamin for people.
Yeah.
So this is not one that you just take lots of it and there's no repercussions for it. So you need to get it tested, get your levels tested first, see where they're at. So go to your doctor, ask for a 25 hydroxy vitamin D test. You get that test, the result comes back. If you're in the US, the range for the vitamin D is 30 to 100 ngml. That's a really wide range. And if you're at 30, you're going to be told that's normal, right? If you're on the upper end of that, you might still be told that's normal. 30 is not normal. You do want it higher than that. You want to bring it closer to that center range. But again, before you start just supplementing with really high doses or high amounts, you might want to consider one of the best sources of vitamin D, which is the sun, right? The sun is a great source because what happens is when the sun's rays touch your skin, they interact with this type of cholesterol that leads to the production of vitamin D3. That D3 is sent to your liver. From here, the liver changes D3 to a substance called 25-OHD, and that chemical is sent all over your body, different tissues, your kidneys. That's where it's going to be activated into vitamin D, and it's called calcitriol there. So that activated vitamin D is what's going to travel all around your body and provide us with all those benefits. So the sun can be a great source of that. But if you are in those cold weather months, especially, the sun's rays might not be strong enough to generate enough vitamin D production. So maybe at that point, supplementation is important. But again, you want to monitor your levels at that point too.
Yeah, when we're measuring vitamin D, we're measuring the storage form of it, and what you're talking about is the active form of it. So there's many, many metabolites of vitamin D, and some of which make sure we're not overdosing on it, that we accidentally don't get too much of it. And when we get it from the sun, we're not throwing other things out of balance. So ideally, I talk all about this. I have videos on YouTube about how to safely get full spectrum sun exposure, not just go out and fry yourself. That's not what we're saying here. We want to make sure we're getting, that early morning light to precondition the skin, that UVA morning light, and then that sunset light, which is going to heal the skin from some of that damage from these UV rays. And that, building up our solar callus, really, really important. And I'm not surprised to see that you're tan, because it's like, I always say tanning is a flex again, because it's really, really important. So we want to do that gently, gradually, don't burn. Try not to wear sunglasses because that's going to throw off the signal from your skin. But that's hugely important for our bone health, our metabolic health, our immune health, everything, because everything is, connected. So super helpful when it comes to understanding these medications and certain nutrients that can be really supportive. So let's keep diving in, I guess, to nutrients and foods that would maybe be supportive for healthy bones.
Yeah, let's talk about a couple other ones that I think are important. So one of my favorite foods that has a good dose of protein, has a good dose of omega-3s, and has minerals in the right ratios that nature put them in are these tiny little bone-in fish like sardines, mackerel, wild sockeye salmon. If you get them in a BPA-free can, they're not going to poke or hurt your mouth, but they have all the minerals in the right ratios that nature put them in. So it is such a good source of protein, minerals, omega-3s. Omega-3s are like dampeners of inflammation, so that can be really helpful too.
Yeah, I thank you for the reminder and encouragement to go back to eating some of these, sardines. I just saw some in my pantry literally just before this interview. I was like, I got to do this. And I get the kind with the bone in. And I was like, how am I going to be eating a bone? But it's so soft. You can like mush it with your tongue. And I kind of actually like the texture of it. And same thing with the canned salmon. You keep in, bone in, skin on. That's where that vitamin D is going to be. That's where the bones are going to be. And we're going to get that really nice bioavailable form of calcium and all these other nutrients, because it's coming packaged together, like you said, as nature intended. It's not just one single nutrient that the body may not know what to do with. Like we need a lot of these cofactors, meaning these nutrients work in synergy with each other to, do the right things in the body. So just by dumping a boatload of calcium in, it's not always doing exactly what we think. So sardines, canned fish, I personally recommend to get them in water because I don't really trust the oils that they're in. So what's a not Vital Choice? Is that?
Yep.
Yeah, that's one of the good brands. Yeah. So yeah, that's great.
I totally agree. And because I was just thinking, people are going to listen to this and go to Costco and they're going to see sardines that are just covered in oil. They don't have the bones in. They're just the little sardine fillets.
Yeah.
And those aren't the ones you want. You want good quality ones. Even if you're on a budget, you could still make that work too.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are a great source, and I love them because you need protein. You got to be
Yep.
getting protein in your meals. I love arugula too. Arugula, leafy green, same cruciferous family of vegetables as broccoli and kale. It's a rich source of vitamin K, vitamin C, and bioavailable calcium. So
Amazing.
if you go to the store, and normally we wouldn't want to buy stuff in packages, but the reality of our lives is you go to Whole Foods, stuff's in packages, right? It's not just loose leaf
Yeah.
spinach or arugula that you're picking up. But when you look at the back of a bag of spinach, you'll see that it has really high calcium in it. Well, there's also high oxalates, and oxalates bind up calcium. So if you are someone who has chronic digestive issues or joint pain or kidney stones or something like that, you don't want to be eating really high oxalate foods. And spinach, in those cases, you would probably want to swap that spinach with the arugula.
Yeah.
And even if you don't have issues with oxalates, arugula is still just a great addition because it's a bitter food. And our diets today are largely devoid of bitter foods. And bitters are important because they help stimulate bile. Bile is produced in the liver, it's stored in the gallbladder. When you eat a fatty meal, that's pushed into the small intestine, and it helps break down and emulsify these fats. And you need these fats to help absorb the fat soluble nutrients, vitamins A, D, E, and K.
Hmm.
Right. So when we're eating bitter foods, that can actually help support digestion as well. So another reason why I love arugula.
Yeah. I love that recommendation. And I love that you brought up the oxalates. Spinach and Swiss chard are particularly high. Spinach is like off the charts high, even if you cook it. So we don't want to be having these like spinach and kale smoothies every morning with these boatloads of greens that we all thought was really healthy in 2012. And now we're like, I've been doing that every day. Like this is where my heart goes out to people because they're trying so hard, right? It's like you're not having a pancake breakfast. You're having, you're trying, you're making these smoothies, and it's like this actually isn't in your best interest. It's actually potentially doing some more harm than good. So cooking these greens will reduce some of the oxalate content, but I would say that I like, there's so many other types. And if you go with something like arugula, you get the benefits of the bitters, and then you're supporting that liver gallbladder health, the fat digestion, which, like you said, helps us absorb fat soluble nutrients, and even fats and proteins help the digestion of each other. Those are both important for building bones. And it's also helpful to absorb minerals when we have more stomach acid and better bile. So again, like there's just so much synergy and connection in everything you're talking about, and multiple benefits of each thing. So amazing. Keep going. Love this.
Let's go to vitamin C now, because
Yep.
vitamin C is really important. I talked about how it's important when you're growing, you're developing, trying to build a healthy skeleton from a young age. We always hear about vitamin C is great for your immune system and all this other stuff.
Mm.
Yeah, it's important. It's also important for your bones too.
Wow.
One of the reasons for that is that, remember I said your bones are 50% protein by volume, and they are this collagen protein matrix structure with minerals kind of laced in there. So
Yes.
vitamin C stimulates procollagen, it enhances collagen synthesis, and it stimulates alkaline phosphatase activity, which is a marker for bone building cell formation, which is pretty cool, right? So we want to incorporate vitamin C for our bones too.
Mm-hmm.
You can get it from different berry sources. There are some, rare Amazonian berries, camu camu and kakadu plums and astrarola cherries and all those kinds of ones. Or if it's what makes sense for you and it's available to you, you can go to the grocery store, get yourself some organic blueberries or strawberries or blackberries or whatever you're going to get. But those can be some good sources,
Mm-hmm.
or even lemons and limes
Mm-hmm.
too. Can be some
Yeah.
great additions.
And those are all low carb friendly. Even broccoli has a lot of vitamin C in it. Tomatoes. So a lot of low carb items have this. You don't need to be chugging orange juice to get vitamin C, which would honestly
Please
do the
don't.
opposite.
Yeah, please
Yeah,
don't.
please don't do that. Love that. Yeah.
We don't need to be chugging orange juice, because you're going to look at it and you're going to be like, oh wow, it's got calcium in it too, right? That's not going to be your best sources of that either. So
Yeah.
um, let's talk about dairy for a second, because I know that comes
Yes.
up a lot with people. I am not anti-dairy.
Mhm.
But I don't think it's right for every single person, right? So if you have, let's use an example. If you have an autoimmune condition and you're trying to get that into remission, dairy, right as you're starting out, that might not be the right fit for you, right?
Yeah.
Um, if you are going to consume dairy, it's not about drinking a bunch of glasses of milk. We want to focus on cultured and fermented dairy. So think yogurts that are not just a bunch of added sugar.
Yeah.
Kefirs, right?
Mhm.
You can find, there's this great brand that I love, Alexander. It's got A2 kefir out there right now. That's a great one. I have no affiliation with the brand, just think it's a good one. But there are other ones too that you can find that have good good calcium levels in it, good protein in it. It does have healthy fats, but you can also get other benefits from drinking the cultured forms of
Mhm.
these forms of dairy. So those could be additions, but again, it's got to make sense for you. Whey protein,
Mhm.
kind of the same thing. It can be helpful for some people,
Mhm.
and it can be especially helpful if you're trying to build muscle and bone. But if you are sensitive to it or you have an intolerance to it, that might not be the right fit. So
Yeah. And just be careful, whey protein it does increase insulin levels. So if you are a, bodybuilder and you have great metabolic health, what are you doing listening to the show? No, I'm just joking. But chances are that's not most of my audience. But yeah, for many people, the whey and the dairy is always it's a individual case, and some people tolerate certain forms of dairy better than others. And so just really be careful. And it's not a blanket statement that like, oh, eat dairy, any kind of dairy has the calcium you need, because something like butter, I believe, is very low in calcium. Is that accurate?
that is, yeah,
Yeah.
that's not a source of calcium. That would be just the source of healthy fats, right?
Yes. Yep.
But yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying too. Is it the things that I'm talking about here? It may not be right for you. And I always tell people, especially when it comes to foods,
Hmm.
approach things with curiosity instead of expectation. And when you do that, your disappointment will disappear. Because a lot of us that have ever been on a health journey, you know that you're going to find this food and it's going to be the thing. You're going to find that supplement, or you're going to figure this device out, and it's going to be the thing that changes it all for you. And you put all your hope into it, and then it doesn't work out, right? Or it
Yeah.
doesn't go as you expected. So if you just approach life like that, approach things with curiosity instead of expectation, your disappointment will disappear. So
I love that so much, and that's such a good way of looking at things, and similar to what I talk about in my group coaching class. So many of us have so many expectations. We're looking for that one thing to help, and I think we're not crazy for thinking this. It used to be we would go to the doctor, we'd have strep throat, and we get one antibiotic and it fixes it. So it's almost like as at a young age we were kind of trained that like this one pill will fix my problems. And then we continue in this healthcare system that we have that's broken, and we're told, okay, you have allergies, take this one allergy pill and your symptoms will go away. So we're just trained in looking for that one thing. And when it comes to chronic disease, I mean, you heard a bunch of things already today talking about what are the contributing factors to bone loss, to metabolic health issues. What we're talking about are chronic health issues, and there's never just one cause. There's never just one cause, which means there's never just going to be one solution. So it's okay, will this contribute to the health, my health and healing? Will this food contribute? Will this activity contribute? Will this environment change contribute in a positive way? So it's not like, okay, Kevin said to eat sardines and then my osteoporosis is going to be fixed. It's never like that. And I wish it could be, because that would be so much easier. We could, just be relaxing on a beach somewhere, be like, problem solved. But that's not it. So this idea of, is this going to help towards my goal? We're not going to see, oh, by tomorrow my osteoporosis is going to be fixed, but we're going to be building up these habits and feeling better in the process. Even if you don't really feel your bones necessarily have a lot of maybe symptoms when you have this, but it's maybe you're like, oh, actually my energy is getting better. Actually, I have fewer cravings. I'm sleeping a little better. My mood is better. So all these things start to happen. And so we can find more joy, more healing, ease, vitality along the way. So love it. Love it so much.
Yeah, I love that too. And
Great.
I think if we're talking about nutrients, we should also talk about, you can take in all the vitamins, the minerals, the nutrients, but if you're not providing the stimulus that your bones need to become stronger, they will
Mm,
not become stronger. So
interesting.
I think this would be great to talk about exercise and
Yes.
things that we can incorporate here. So let's talk about the kinds of stimulus that you can provide and should be providing if you want good, strong, healthy bones. So you have to have two kinds of stimuli, two types of stimuli to really support good bone health. You need muscle pulling on bone, and you need impact. And the most
Mm,
effective interventions are going to use one or both of those things in combination. Most people are just told, do some walking.
mm,
Well, I can tell you right now, walking is great for your health. You can do it after your meals. You can do it in the morning when you wake up, all that stuff. That's great. Keep doing it. But it cannot be the only form of exercise to support good, healthy muscles and good, healthy bones. You need weight bearing exercise, and you need muscle strengthening and resistance training. So let's talk about weight bearing. Weight bearing is where your body and your bones have to work against gravity to keep you upright. There are things you're doing on your feet, and they're placing good, healthy stress on the bones. So this would be your walking, your jogging, your hiking, your gardening, you're playing with the kids or the grandkids outside in the yard, yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi, Qigong, all of that is weight bearing. Those are great things that you can be incorporating into your plan. Now, there's also non weight bearing. And this is where you're not providing the stimulus. You're not doing those things on your feet, and you're not providing that good, healthy stimulus for stronger, healthier bones. The exercises that fall in that category would be swimming, cycling, especially
mm.
swimming, though. And this is kind of the same thing that astronauts deal with when they go up into space, is they don't have that stimulus that's being placed on their bones. So they can lose bone density, bone strength very rapidly. Very much use it or lose it with your muscles and your bones.
Yeah.
So it's not to say that if you enjoy cycling or you enjoy getting into the pool and doing some laps, that you should stop doing that. Or if it just brings you joy, makes you happy, you do it with the family, that's great. Keep doing it. What you can't do is get in the pool 5 days a week, swim some laps, get out and say, I did my exercise.
Mm.
Because you didn't. You're not providing that stimulus that you need. So you need to incorporate this other form of exercise that is so, so important. And this is muscle strengthening and resistance training exercise. And this is where we have that muscle pulling on bone. You have a
Mm.
mechanical signal that sends a chemical signal to tell those bones to become stronger. So with this, we need to be incorporating, or we want to be incorporating, you could be doing barbells, you could be doing dumbbells. If your comfort level is just in the machines at the gym, you could be doing that. I really like,
Cables.
yeah, cables. I really like variable resistance. You've got resistance bands that you're using, and a bar with that. That can be really helpful. And some of the big movements that I like to incorporate would be squats, deadlifts, overhead presses. Those are big bang for your buck movements that you can be doing. And I know when some people hear those, they're like, oh gosh, deadlift sounds intimidating, right? Or
I
squats
was just
sound
doing those this
intimidating.
morning.
And I get that. I really do. But what you have to understand is you don't have to start at the highest intensity doing the heaviest weight from day one. That's not where you want to be. What you want to do is you want to get your body mechanics first. Go see a personal trainer or somebody who you can meet in person, or even online. There's plenty of virtual online stuff that you can do, and get your body mechanics right, and slowly progress up with a weight that you feel comfortable with, that you can do with good form to prevent injury. We don't want to have injuries and setbacks.
Mhm.
And then you progress up in intensity to where you're comfortable with it, but now you're also providing that stimulus that you need to become stronger. So that's like, if you're getting to the 5 to 10 repetition range, that's a good place to be.
Amazing. So I may have done a lot of things wrong as a kid, nutrition wise. I didn't know. My mom didn't know at the time, but I think I did one thing right. I was a competitive tap dancer. We slammed on the floor, and so maybe that was. And my mom used to want me to get tan, unlike a lot of other moms who are slapping their kids with sunscreen. So I think that the tanning, being at the beach in the summer and tap dancing may have saved my bones a little bit.
That's good. You probably built up a little more peak bone mass because of
Yeah,
that.
yeah, for sure. So you've given us so many great strategies when it comes to diet, lifestyle. Is there anything else that you missed? I know that you have a great plan for helping people build back their bones. And is there anything that we haven't talked about? We talked about stress mitigation, all the things. So anything else missing that you feel like you want to add today?
Yeah. So what I would say is let's even, I'll share very briefly. I think what's important is we can do the Stronger Bones Masterclass in the show notes, give everybody free access to that. You get a free bone healthy recipes guide with that too. Everybody can get access to that. But what I'll do is I'll zoom out and let's just look at the full picture. Let's bring everything that we talked about full circle,
Mm-hmm.
which is when you go do this, if you don't have a marker for your bone density, your bone quality, your bone strength, go get some objective measurement to know where you're at so you have a point to monitor future changes. It's going to be in your best interest long term to do this. And even if something does come up, there are things you can do right now. You can be proactive, you can be on the side of prevention. And it's very empowering once you actually learn these things and you're like, gosh, I've got the plan. I can do this for my life. Right. So that's really awesome. You have to zoom out and look at the full picture. Your
Mm-hmm.
doctor only has 15 minutes with you. They're not going to be able to address every single thing that you need to address. So the first bucket that we have to look at is you have to identify and address any of those root cause issues contributing to bone loss and bone damage. Danielle, I know you do a lot of work with this. This is fantastic. You can start addressing these underlying issues, prevent that bone loss. Then we can start focusing on diet, digestion, absorption, making sure you're taking in the right nutrients in the right amounts for you as an individual, actually absorbing those nutrients, making sure those nutrients are making it to the cell level. All three of those things got to line up. And the third part of this is building strength of body, strength of mind, strength of bone, reducing that stress, improving that sleep. It's pretty well documented. If you're not sleeping good, it can reduce your bone quality. So we got to get that dialed in. That is actually one of the biggest levers you can pull, not just in your bone health, but in your entire health is in
Yes.
that sleep. And getting the hormones optimized and getting the right exercise plan in place. When you do those things, you're going to be moving in the right direction. Okay. You're
Love
going to
that.
be setting yourself up for an active future with the people you love most. That's what everybody wants. You want to be going on those bucket list adventures that you've been thinking about and planning for a long time. Take care of your bones. That's the way to do it.
I love it. And I feel very confident that with all the things that you've outlined, I feel confident I will not develop osteoporosis because, I feel like I've checked a lot of things off the bucket, but also I have this new information, ways to monitor, make sure things are going in the right direction. And a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, I don't do dairy. So are my bones going to just like crack and turn to sand, So it can feel challenging when we don't have the full picture. And so I hope that people are feeling more confident that like, oh, this actually feels doable. This is, a lot of the stuff that I'm already doing. And I love when I bring different specialists on and we realize like, I talk about blood sugar, you're talking about bones, someone's talking about gut health, someone's talking about the liver. It's like, wouldn't you know, all these basic things are supportive for all the organs, all the tissues, all the things, all the systems in our body. There's so many foundations that just overlap. And that's the part where it's like, we don't have to be doing 100 million things. It's like dial in these foundations and add the specific little tweaks for whatever you have going on. So just making sure to go out of your way to eat the sardines and remember them so they're not rotting away in your cabinet. These kind of little things that can really help us go a long way. So we're going to link this stuff in the show notes. We're going to link your Instagram, all your podcasts and all your website. And so thank you so much for being here, Kevin. I'm really excited to get this episode out to everyone. I think they're going to love it and feel really empowered and excited that a lot of what they're doing is already supporting their bones. And we just add these little tweaks in. So yeah, thanks for being here.
I love it. Thanks for having me.